say to you may be painful, not as appetizing as Lechon Diva's talk. But you see, I will ask us together to be in a quiet place in the next 15 minutes. Because in that quiet place, we will be able to see our country's collective pain and find in that pain the key to our own redemption. There has never been a time in our country's history where we were this confused about right and wrong. Even during the height of injustice of the Marcos regime, we were angry, but we were not confused. We collectively fought against the abuses of the regime. By any normal, moral, and legal standard, we should have already let out a collective scream and immediately resisted the bloodbath of no less than 27,000 Filipinos. I say 27,000 Filipinos because when the Supreme Court conducted a hearing on the EJ case, and I was still there last year, they admitted to us that there were 4,000 deaths, more than 4,000 deaths, during police operations, which they admitted, and no less than 23,000 deaths under investigation. So that's as of last year. But you know, we did not ask the madness to stop. All of us know now and knew then that the killing of innocents, which is propelled by a call to kill, kill, and again kill, goes against our very ethos as a people. Inside, we are asking, where are our beliefs in God, in the value of human dignity, in the value of human life and compassion? Where have they all gone? And because such questions are so fundamental, you and I, we cannot suppress those questions because ultimately you have to prepare yourself to ask, when the killing of the innocent touches my sister, my brother, my friend, my child, will I have the right to protest in righteous anger at the injustice and at the brutality? Because we did not protest when the death of others met their unjust end, shall we be forced to just bury our own dead quietly, muffling our own cries, unable to fully mourn, unable to be fully angry, just bewildered and paralyzed? Yes, paralyzed. Because we have allowed ourselves to be paralyzed from thinking, from taking action, from protesting out of fear. We have become fearful because our brains stopped functioning. We allowed our brains to stop functioning when we gave up on justice. We gave up on justice when we stopped caring about whether the police really have the correct target, whether the law was behind them when they pulled the trigger, and whether they were going to engage in a massive cover-up for the massive killings. We gave up on each other, saying we are collectively a hopeless people. We think we cannot do anything about crime. We think we cannot secure justice anyway, so let's just kill all the addicts and all the criminals. But I say to you, it is not true that we have to kill relentlessly. First, who controls the ports that let in the tons of shabu? Who controls and allows the vehicles to get out from the ports and reach the warehouses where the shabu is repacked? Who has the ability to put ears and assets in every barangay in this country? Who has the power to effect arrests? Who has the power to incarcerate the guilty? The answer to all of these is government. I say to you, the government is simply too plain lazy to to think through the complexity of the drug problem. That, or it is simply a leadership that thrives on fear and anarchy. So you say, some of you may say, it is too hard, maybe even impossible, because you see, government is too dysfunctional. In turn, I ask you, since when has the dysfunctionality of any government been the basis of the killing of Filipinos? No human being can act as accuser, witness, judge, and executioner at the same time. By any language, in any legal or moral system, that is the height of injustice. Whether it results in the death of a human being or the illegal removal from office of another, that is the same, the death of justice. So what I will say today to you is a very daring idea, because nobody has dared to say it directly. You know, we can't think right now because that we can solve our problems because we don't hope. We dare not hope because we are afraid. And we are afraid because we have too many considerations. One is, I'm afraid of being bashed. Another is, I don't want to offend my friends or relatives who support our leader. Another is, I wouldn't want to lose my chances of promotion or re-election. And another is simply, I am so afraid for my own personal safety. I say to you now, any religious or moral tradition in this world always points to only one thing that you must be afraid of, that you are not doing what is right. For those who believe in the existence of the human soul, you know the eternal consequences of acting against your conscience. You know that you will only fully realize your human potential when you act justly for the sake of others. At the end of the day, and at the end of our lives, there is nothing more worth doing than doing what is right. For what we have now is a crisis of the soul of the nation. When gross injustice assaults our senses day in and day out, and we do not express our outrage, something in us dies. To avoid the spate of the slow death of our souls, we try to distract ourselves with other things. We even try to rationalize what we are saying. But what we are actually doing, by ignoring or rationalizing, is we are trying to drown out our conscience. We are trying to drown out our conscience that says, you, each of you have been made in the image of God. Do what is right. Respond to the higher call of what you were made to be. On the other hand, when despite our fears, we fix our sights on a vision of the future and rise above the base things that prevent us from being fully human, from being fully responsive to the needs of others, then something inside of us is awakened and something beautiful happens. We have finally found our courage. We may never see the day when we confront an enemy without our knees shaking or our voices trembling. But when we do confront the enemy, that very act transforms us because we proceed from an inner conviction that what we are doing is right. The prospect of speaking out against injustice may overwhelm us. But when we focus on the goal of seeing our country freed from the injustices that pollute the land, then we will muster our internal strength, call out for help, and fight. For what is it that we are fighting against? We are fighting against the orphaning of our nation and the mortgaging of our future. That is why we must resist the argument of collateral damage. We must resist not only a false excuse for senseless death, for what do we now have? But a generation of at least 80,000 orphan children. Many of them saw their parents killed before their very eyes. They will grow up bitter, angry, confused, and broken. No government agency has accepted responsibility for these children. And in some communities, those children have, because they are abandoned, turned to drugs themselves. Now, what has been happening to the Catholic Church that has been taking many of these orphans? The government, the president, has been relentlessly attacking them. But never mind, the Catholic Church knows that it must be brave, because it is only by being brave that it can prevent many more orphans from being created. And this is actually quite puzzling to me, that we have seen human rights advocates in the wrong light. If you look at them, what are they really fighting for? For the rule of law, for a working democracy, for due process. You see, what they're doing right now is they're not just trying to give justice to the dead, but they're also trying to protect you. Many believe that the judiciary has been compromised, and this is the same judiciary that should have been, under our Constitution, able to protect you when your rights are already threatened. And when it comes to rights, one's rights must apply equally to all. We cannot say that some of us, we have the right to due process, to be heard before we are pronounced guilty, to be deprived of liberty or life without a judge hearing the evidence. And then in the same breath, say that some do not deserve those rights. If you do that, and because the checks and balances in our system have already been destroyed, and due process rights have been rendered inutile, then you are as vulnerable as anybody else. Maybe not for drugs, maybe because you crossed the wrong person, maybe because you had an enemy who happens to be politically well connected. You won't be charged for drugs, but maybe for another crime. You look too decent to be charged for drugs, maybe you live in a gated village. But it's all the same. And when the rules don't work, to ensure that human dignity is respected, when people are seen as no better than animals, then the social mindset sets in that allows for a situation where scores and masses of people can be exterminated. In a very real sense, genocide is altogether possible. It was to prevent this, the downward slide of our country, that in August of 2016, I wrote a very respectful letter to the President, asking him not to publicly announce those who suspects as being judges coddling drug lords. I had to do that, not for the sake of opposing him, but because I knew that our judges were already so afraid at the time, and if they are afraid, they would be too paralyzed as well to protect you. So, you understand that all of us must be brave, so that others who have the capacity to do good, to protect you, will be brave as well. And yes, we must also be brave so those who need cure can be cured. Many former drug addicts are now with us, doing good amongst us. They were afflicted and they received help. Many of us need help for various forms of illnesses as well. They needed healing, they received it. Says that hope is so essential to existence as food. If we give up on a mass of people simply because curing them, healing them, is so exhausting of society's resources, then we forget that society burdened them first, many of them, so that they were driven to lives of desperation and they turned to drugs. We must be brave because we, all of us, cannot give up on human dignity, on human life, on second chances. And when you do the right thing, as many of you have already started to experience, you will be disparaged, you will be persecuted, many times you will be discouraged. But be heartened by the truth that when you stand for what is right, and despite the persecution, you continue to stand, that in itself is a great victory. You have already won. And as we fight, we learn that faith, courage, and the faith that underlies courage is contagious. Do not allow the absence of courage facilitate the imposition of martial law. You see, politicians understand that if citizens, all of us, allow the gradual erosion of our rights, then it is so easy to impose martial law. All it needs is a justification, an event, perhaps real, perhaps fake. But it's all that, an excuse. I ask you, however, to view things a little differently. We do not need the formal imposition of martial law to have martial law become an actual reality. We do not need to see tanks on the street or men in uniform taking charge. We just need to be sufficiently afraid. Afraid enough to stay quiet when we know and see that human beings are being killed. When we see corruption running unabated. When we know that the coffers of our country are being raided with impunity. And if all we do is complain amongst ourselves and not act collectively to publicly denounce corruption and lawlessness in government, then we have already imposed martial law in our minds. You see, the first objective of martial law is control, to impose control. And when you do not speak out when you should, you have actually imposed martial law on yourselves. We would have then helped the tyrant win. We would be back to the years of unhindered Marcus looting, allowing our future to be mortgaged. Remember that part of what government takes from every Filipino, whether it's from taxes or fees, part of that goes to paying off the unconscionable debt burden left behind by the Marcos regime. We may very well return to that time. And when patrols of all abuse are gone, your future is being mortgaged. Mortgaged because we are leaving a host of problems that will be agonizingly, excruciatingly difficult for your generation to address. The deaths of the 27,000 will cry for justice. How will you address that? The orphaned 80,000 will cry for justice and their place in the sun. How will you address that? The financial burdens that are being addressed on you, imposed because of unmitigated corruption, how will you address that? That is why we must speak now and be brave, because we cannot allow the mortgaging of your future and the future of your children. So, what you and I can do right now, even at this very moment, is we must decide that we will be brave. Stand, have courage, because only when you come to this point of decision can we prevent the destruction of your generation's future. And on a personal note, and I will end with this, allow me to share that my deepest hope is God Himself will work as to spare your generation from the horrors of a government gone mad. It is to Him that we must look, so that we can find in our present deepest pain the secret to our country's redemption. Maraming salamat.